Welcome back to the Z-Files. I am Professor Z, and I will be your host for this episode. This podcast is your one-stop shop for all things crime-related. I use my 8 years of research and 3 years as a criminology professor to cram each episode with facts about crime patterns, statistics, criminal behavior, and tips for improving your personal safety. Say goodbye to the fear you think you have about crime, and say hello to your new expertise in the field of criminology. This episode is called Glass Ceilings and Low Morals, and this is part 2 in our series all about homicide. Last time we ended talking about serial killers. This time I would like us to pick up talking about the last type of street-level homicide, and that is mass murder. Mass murder is defined as killing 4 or more individuals in a single event or during a short period of time. Mass murderers tend to surprise their victims because they often attack in everyday locales that are considered safe, and because these attacks erupt spontaneously.
911, what's the location of the emergency?
Sandy Hook School. I think there's somebody shooting in here. Sandy Hook School.
Okay, what makes you think that?
Because somebody's got a gun. I saw a glimpse of somebody. They're running down the hallway.
Okay.
They're still running. They're still shooting. Sandy Hook School, please.
Nearly all mass shooters have 4 things in common. First, they have an early childhood trauma or exposure to violence.
Psychologist Gillian Peterson is co-founder of the Violence Project. Its findings will be published later in a book, and she joins us now. Gillian, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Let me start with this idea of childhood trauma, because people hear that right away and say, red flag, red flag. What did you find out, though, about childhood trauma and these mass shooters?
So we found that it's really a slow build over time. So you do see intense childhood trauma, things like parental suicide, serious physical and sexual abuse, heavy bullying. But then that builds over time. You add in mental health concerns, you add in a real crisis point, and then access to this script for this form of violence and the means to carry it out. And so we do see these.
Second, they have an identifiable grievance or crisis point. Third, they have the means to carry out an attack, basically just meaning they've got access to a weapon. And last, they have a history of studying the actions of past shooters that involves seeking validation from people for their own methods and motives. Generally, mass shooters are going to show signs before they carry out an attack. This might be through conversations, it might be through social media activities, it might be through an essay or different kinds of artwork, but generally there are some signs leading up to one of these attacks. The average age for a mass shooter is around 34 years old, but we've had mass shooters as young as 11 years old and as old as 70. Current or former workplaces of perpetrators are the most common sites for mass shootings.
Deputies say a disgruntled former employee at a small manufacturing warehouse in Orlando had one mission this morning: to kill.
We have 5 no codes, no vitals on scene.
According to investigators, 45-year-old Army vet John Robert Newman, armed with a knife and a pistol, targeted and murdered his former co-workers before then turning the gun on himself.
Almost all mass shooters at restaurants, bars, and retail establishments were strangers to those businesses, whereas offenders in workplaces, houses of worship, and schools tended to be current or former students and were known to the victims. Like serial killers, a one-size-fits-all profile for mass shooters does not exist. I've also noticed that there's a lot of variance in how the different news outlets describes a shooting as being a mass killing or not. And I just want everyone to know that the actual definition is defined as killing 4 or more, as I stated earlier. I've noticed, especially this year, there have been a lot of reports of quote-unquote mass shootings, but a lot of those don't actually fit the definition. Not to downplay the death and the carnage that happened, like that was terrible and wrong. I'm just saying it doesn't fit our definition of a mass shooting. And we have not, in fact, had 200 mass shootings in the year 2022. I just saw that again from another news outlet. We've actually had less than 200 mass shootings for the past 30 years. So you really need to check into how people are defining what they call a mass shooting when you see that reported. Anyways, mass shootings account for less than 1% of all firearm homicides in the United States, which isn't to say it's a small problem that we should ignore, but it should give us hope that the scope of this problem is within our ability to understand and to solve. We don't necessarily need legislation that's going to affect the other 99.99999% of uses of a firearm. We all just need to come together to stop this problem that accounts for less than 1% of all firearm homicides. Can we, as adults, logically come together and figure out a solution for this? Yes, it's within our grasp. Will we? I don't know. I just hear the same old arguments. Literally nothing changes after a school shooting. And no matter what side claims to be trying to do the best for the people, they haven't come up with a single tangible solution that's being enacted today. Why can't we mandate steel bolts that go 3 inches into the door frame from the ground and from the top of the door in the event of emergency? Why don't our schools have escape tunnels with a hatch in every class that students and teachers can escape through? Why don't we hire veterans or members of the reserve forces to stand security at a door? What if every classroom ceiling had a flash grenade that could be deployed from a control panel in the police department and stop a shooter in their tracks? Yes, I know every one of these ideas will have its flaws, but will the flaws from these ideas still allow mass casualties to happen at elementary schools? I don't think so. We've got to do something. Mass shootings are not something we have to accept in a free society. If we can secure our president in a White House, and nearly all of our federal buildings, with the January 6th Capitol incident aside, surely we can figure out how to keep elementary school students safe. The Secret Service are good at their job. Why don't we have them brainstorming with politicians? I know we are at a point in our intellectual development as humans and technology advances to solve this problem. It's ridiculous that we can't move a single thing through Congress about it. Absolutely ridiculous. Okay, I'm fired up, so let's go right into non-traditional homicides. Over the years, there has been a disproportionate focus on street crime. This focus has produced labels on certain segments of society that are defined as bad, deviant, or immoral. Evil became a drama to entertain us, and the notion of us versus them emerged. We tend to think of criminals as being an alien race to us. The media has already programmed our brains to be fascinated by the most heinous and destructive crimes. Crime coverage of 3 national news networks nearly tripled in the year 1993, despite the fact that crime rates fell during the same period. In a study of 9,422 homicides in Los Angeles County over the span of 4 years, researchers found only certain homicides gained public attention. Stories were selected that featured victims who were elderly, children, female, educated, or from middle-class households, despite the fact that 85% of homicide victims in this area were young and non-white males. The picture of common victims of crime has been falsified, and with it, so has our image of the deadliest offenders. These deadly offenders are known as the Elite Deviants. An Elite Deviant is an offender of white-collar crime. As a refresher from the previous episodes, white-collar crime is criminal action made possible by someone's position or their power in a society. Elite Deviants are responsible for more deaths each year than the offenders recorded by the FBI in the UCR. Elite Deviants murder people by intentionally causing unsafe work conditions or by releasing unsafe products on the market. Oftentimes, companies are aware that the product they are about to sell is risky, or they know that they should do some more research before distributing it. And it's the same for workplace safety. In today's modern age, we have the knowledge about the structural needs of a factory as well as the ability to monitor for toxic chemicals that might harm workers. The problem isn't ignorance, it's greed. The National Commission on Product Safety revealed that 20 million Americans are injured in the home as a result of incidents connected with consumer products. Of that total, 110,000 are permanently disabled and 30,000 are killed. A significant number could have been spared if more attention had been paid to hazard reduction. Let's start with the Ford Car Company. The Ford Car Company manufactured a model known as the Pinto between 1971 and 1976.
Ford's Pinto is priced like a small economy import, but it's frisky, with a wider stance than any little import, so you won't be pushed around by the wind. And Pinto's strong, built to run and run and run. Pinto, a little better idea at your Ford dealer.
This car model featured a rear-mounted fuel tank. This design was fatal. Upon any impact with another car going above 20 miles per hour, the fuel tank was easily punctured by bolts, and the gas tank leaked the entire contents out in less than a minute. This led to catastrophic explosions that killed the occupants of the Pinto, and sometimes the other car's occupants as well. Ford Company executives were aware of this. They have company documents talking about the problem, as well as a cost-benefit analysis of how much it would cost to recall the cars and do repairs. They realized it would cost $11 per vehicle. So in total, it would have cost the company $113 million to repair all the Pintos so they didn't kill people in a fender bender. However, if they chose not to fix the cars and were only responsible for damage payouts to those victims' families who took them to court, the most they could expect to pay was $49 million. They chose to keep the Pinto on the market, knowing that people would die, because they could save money. Pintos were not recalled until 1978. Anywhere from 27 to 180 people died in these explosions. I don't know the ages or the names of those who died at the hands of the Ford Car Company, and that shouldn't matter anyways. Death is death. It's all tragic. But can you imagine if someone had a baby in the back seat when one of those collisions happened? Ford isn't the only villain in the automobile industry, though. Traditionally, this industry has resisted new safety devices because the added cost might hurt their sales. Following tests in the late 1950s, the government ruled that lap seatbelts would be required to be installed in all cars by January 1st of 1965. Car manufacturers resisted this, even though clear evidence showed these devices would save lives. Many waited until it was a government mandate to install safety belts. Traffic fatalities decreased 6%, all credited to the installation of seatbelts. The next life-saving invention was the airbag. A study done by Allstate Insurance concluded that airbags would reduce occupant crash deaths by 65%. Once again, car manufacturers resisted installing airbags. Had all cars been so equipped in 1975, 9,500 people would have survived their car crashes that year. Additionally, 104,000 serious injuries could have been prevented. Now shift your attention away from car manufacturers and look at the companies who make medicines or medical devices that are supposed to improve our lives in some way. Bayer Pharmaceutical Company is a household name responsible for a variety of products, including Yaz and Yasmin. Yaz and Yasmin birth control were approved by the FDA in the early 2000s and were regarded as revolutionary contraception methods. These pills used a synthetic hormone called drospironin, or DSP. It also had a mild laxative effect, so it didn't cause bloating and acne like other birth control pills on the market at the time. it seemed that these pills actually helped with weight loss a little bit. The romance came to an end when 2 young, healthy women died. They had no other anomalies or cohesive factors other than the use of these 2 drugs. One of these women was an 18-year-old college freshman who died on campus in New Jersey when she collapsed and suffered cardiac arrest from a massive blood clot. Hundreds of women have died from complications stemming from Yaz or Yasmin.
Warning. Call 800-637-8170 if you have taken or are currently taking Yasmin, Yaz, or Ocella birth control and have suffered a heart attack, stroke, blood clot, CVT, or any other serious injury. You may have a claim. Contact our offices immediately for a free case evaluation. Call 800-637-8170 or visit YazInjuryAttorney.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Bayer is also the manufacturer of the Mirena IUD. Due to its ease of use, it's routinely prescribed to women who forget to take birth control, and it's especially popular among women serving in the armed forces. Women who have the Mirena have reported dangerous complications, including birth issues, ectopic pregnancies, perforation of the uterus, and chronic infections. Due to over 1,000 complaints surrounding the Mirena, the FDA published a press release in May of 2008, forcing Bayer to highlight the dangers of an ectopic pregnancy. Up to 1 in every 1,000 users will experience an ectopic pregnancy with the Mirena in place. It's guaranteed. And up to half of all these will result in a life-threatening complication for the mother. 1 in every 1,000 are not small odds. If those were the odds for winning the lottery, a lot more people would be cashing in. Let's travel back to the rest of Bayer's past to see why they are comfortable still offering a device that seriously harms or kills mothers and babies. Bayer was founded in 1863 to sell synthetic dyes for the textile industry in Germany. By 1913, it had expanded into chemical and pharmaceuticals, and it had operations in Russia, France, Belgium, the UK, and the United States. World War I was hard on the company, and as a result, most of their foreign assets were confiscated, including their US patents for aspirin and heroin. That's right, in the early 1900s, Bayer chemists discovered a formula that is very similar to present-day heroin, and they had prescribed it for a variety of maladies, including baby colic. And this was so easy to buy, you could go down to any drugstore and get it just like you could go down today and buy a pack of Tic Tacs. It was that easy. Anyhow, Congress realized that this was drastically increasing heroin addiction, and they shut that down in 1920. Anyhow, back to the point. Bayer had to become a part of another company to survive the 1920s. So they joined up with a German company by the name of IG Farben Industry. IG Farben went on to sponsor Auschwitz doctors to test their drugs on concentration camp victims and try to discover the secrets of heredity in line with Joseph Mengele's experiments. The company was dissolved by Allied forces in 1952 due to its egregious war crimes and participation in Nazi Germany. Bayer was one of the 4 branches that survived this liquidation and continued business. Now, I have my own theory about Elite Deviants that I really need to publish because so far it's explained numerous white-collar crimes. I believe that just as certain drugs can act as gateway drugs and start rewiring the brain towards an addiction, certain white-collar crimes can act as gateway crimes for a company or a white-collar criminal and sets them on the path of habitual offending. Bayer's parent company, IG Farben, obviously had no morals as they were sponsoring and heavily invested in experiments carried out on concentration camp victims. At its inception, this company established an attitude that disregarded human life. When Bayer continued on as a company, It kept doing these actions to make profit on the risky side, even if people died. And I have more deeds from the company to prove this. After 1978, Bayer and other pharmaceutical companies began producing Factor VIII and Factor IX. These products are harvested from the blood plasma of non-hemophiliacs. These are designed for people who have hemophilia. Hemophilia is a genetic disorder in which a person's blood cannot clot. As a result, even a minor cut could cause them to bleed out. To cut costs to make their product, Bayer harvested blood from pools of high-risk patients. This included prison populations and people using intravenous drugs. Now, federal law forbids the use of blood from an individual with a history of viral hepatitis, which is a condition that is known to be more prevalent among prison populations and people using intravenous drugs. But Bayer failed to enact strict prerequisites about their blood harvesting. As a result, thousands of hemophiliacs died from the HIV-tainted blood plasma. Once again, no criminal charges for Bayer. And this wasn't an accident. It wasn't like they didn't know. They allowed this part of the blood they needed to be harvested from these populations because it was cheaper. This information is shocking, but don't comfort yourself by saying, well, clearly she's talking in conspiracy theories now. No. Bayer admitted their connections to the Holocaust. They waited 50 years, but the president of the company at that point did issue an apology to Elie Wiesel, a famous Holocaust survivor. Now let's shift gears and talk about deaths that are due to unsafe work conditions. Just under 15,000 industrial deaths are caused by corporate neglect and greed each year. In the early 2000s, the current president of the United States struck down 17 mine safety and health administration safety rules. These included measures on mine rescue teams and emergency oxygen. These safety rules would have been expensive for mining companies to follow, and since those mining companies had contributed to the current president's campaign, it wasn't in their best interest for those rules to become law. A chain of deaths has happened since then due to the weak regulations over safety rules. More than 24 coal miners died in workplace accidents in 2006. Many of said accidents could have been prevented by the safety measures presented by the Mine Safe and Health Administration. In August of 2010, a handheld meter found deep inside the Upper Big Branch mine in West Virginia detected explosive levels of methane before a blast killed 29 miners. Had executives heeded the warning that this meter showed, lives would have been saved, but instead they pushed on to make a profit. The United Mine Workers of America has estimated that 11 coal miners die every day from miners' asthma, silicosis, and black lung. Since the passage of the 1970 Occupational Safety and Health Act, it has been a misdemeanor to cause the death of a worker by intentionally violating safety laws. The maximum prison term under this act is 6 months. And in 1990, they raised the fines for killing someone under this from $10,000 to $70,000 per incident. Unlike our other criminal laws that are mostly focused on punishment, this law focuses on prevention. OSHA is the governing body to check the safety conditions of mines and other workplaces, but it doesn't have the capability to inspect every mine in the country. It only employs 2,200 inspectors and more than 200 offices. They are tasked with inspecting 7.1 million work sites that employ 115 million people. It's impossible for them to properly regulate all work sites in the country. We don't even know the scope of danger and abuse that's happening at these workplaces, but we have a scary idea based on the small percentage of sites they did visit in 2003. In that year, the agency conducted 40,000 inspections and discovered 83,000 safety violations, including over 2,000 repeat violations. On average, every site they inspected had at least 2 safety violations, with a percentage of those being repeat infractions the company had already been penalized for. America can be proud of its claim to be the land of the free, because the laws about mine safety and the oversight by OSHA and the government grant corporations total freedom to commit homicide with unsafe work conditions over and over again. Let me explain the classical criminology school of thought behind criminal behavior to show why I made this statement. During the Enlightenment period, there was a shift in theories about causes of criminal behavior. Previously, deviance was attributed to some kind of supernatural cause, like demon possession or witchcraft. When these ideas were rejected, humans were viewed as rational beings, and crime was seen as a choice made by free will. Philosophers suggested that pain and pleasure were the two determining factors of behavior. While these ideas grew, punishment became a tool to deter people from committing crime. With this idea in mind, if someone is considering a crime, but the risk of being caught or the punishment are too high, they will choose not to do the crime. However, if they perceive the benefits of the crime outweigh the cost of being caught or punished, they will choose the crime. To apply this theory to the deaths caused by unsafe working conditions, corporations have done a cost and benefit analysis and realized in most cases it is easier and cheaper to let workers die than it is to make their mines safer. Even when they are caught and criminally prosecuted, which is rare, it's incredibly rare, the punishment of a potential 6-month prison sentence and low-level fine of $70,000 doesn't compare to the billions they make by cutting corners. I have enough evidence to confidently label executives who make these choices as serial killers. They will probably never be featured in another true crime podcast for their deeds, but make no mistake, their intentional actions to take human life are no different. Let's end this episode with a final math equation. Right now, we have elite deviants responsible for at least 45,000 deaths a year, and at least 110,000 permanent life-altering injuries. The costs from deaths, injuries, and property damage were recently estimated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission at $700 billion annually. The street-level homicides not committed by elite deviants make up only 1/4 of the humans intentionally killed by other humans each year in the United States. Alright, I've filled another episode with things that make me angry. If this stuff makes you angry too, please follow and share my channel. We'll see you next time.
We'll talk to you later.